everybody. Welcome to the Technology Evangelist podcast. I am Dr. John Fluke, Technology Evangelist, and we are brought to you by Medidenta. They're sponsoring this endeavor. They have great products. Be sure to check them out at medidenta.com for the best supplies that you can find. Also, please, a big plea from me, like, subscribe, and if you feel compelled to make a comment, please do. That always helps us in rankings and helps new people find us. I'm also open to guests you might suggest. So if you've got a guest, either put it in the comments or reach out to me. I'm easy to find on the internet and let me know. With that, today I have got a cool guest, a gentleman who has been in dentistry for a long time, but he's going to come at this from the lab perspective. And I think that is super cool. He does a lot of education. I've watched some of his events and I was blown away. So everybody help me welcome certified dental lab technician Jimmy Stegall. Jimmy, thank you for taking the time today to sit on your patio and hang out with me.
This is my happy place, John. It's built this outdoor kitchen about 3 seasons ago, and I spend so much time out here smoking and cooking on the griddle and, even making soup in the wintertime. I just love being out here.
So let me ask you real quick, has nothing to do with dentistry, although he is in dentistry too. Do you happen to know Sean Ryan at Medidenta?
I know the name, so
Okay.
he must be pretty famous, but I don't know that we might have met. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I don't.
The only reason I say that or ask that is he loves to cook, and he's got like an outdoor setup kind of like you do. I think you guys would be able to tell each other some good stories and maybe recommend some recipes. So I'll hook
Nice,
you guys up
nice.
so that you can connect, because I think you could probably swap some good stories.
Sweet.
Jimmy, I always start these episodes off with an origin story. So get in the Wayback Machine, wind it back as far as you want to go, and just tell people how you got to where you are today.
Everybody's story, I'm sure, is a little unique. I was a business major, and a friend of mine who I'd grown up with we were out of school, but he had gotten married, had his first kid, and I was still single and just 1 or 2 years out of school, and I was having a good time. And he thought I needed to settle down, so his parents lived next door to the owner of a small dental lab with about 7 people, and he was growing and needed some help. And my friend said, "You need to go talk to this guy. You need to quit that wild young life and get a real job. And this guy needs help, and you could work 9 to 5 instead of all those night hours you're working." I was a bartender. And so I went by and said hey to Joe Scherer, who had Scherer Dental Lab here in Rock Hill. And he hired me and started training me, and I was the 8th technician. And so I was there for 37 years. And we grew from that 8-person lab to 135 people and had 3 locations. We had a great run. Great guy, taught me a lot. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I really grew to love dental technology. But after about 3 years, it was determined that I was the lab's most okayest dental technician. So I became the guy who went on the road and started calling on dentists and, helping dentists chairside. And that led into the education. At some point, I developed, just evening seminars for my dentist study clubs.
Right?
They always said they were looking for speakers. So I started developing that, and that turned into a really good program that helped us grow as well through education. And I do about 30 or 40 of those a year.
Wow.
And that really helped us grow. And that led into relationships with a couple of dental schools in our region. And I was fortunate enough to be a part-time faculty at MUSC and Augusta University, where I would go in and just chat with the residents of the GPR, AGD programs. And, learning from dental students is also very helpful for lab guys. And all that culminated to a point where a corporate dent supply reached out and said, hey, we'd like you to join us. We think you can help us with education and training. And so I spent 7 years with them, started in the implants, and then moved over into the prosthetics and helped with the development and messaging and training of the digital denture workflow. And that led into nearly 200 programs a year for about 6 or 7 years.
Oh
of
my gosh.
helping labs and dentists figure out how to do digital dentures. And that's been kind of my thing for the last 9 years is talking to dentists about, hey, here's what you need to do for record taking and to make your denture world go better. And actually, it's been fantastic. At our high point at the lab, we were doing 100 dentures a day.
Wow.
So a lot of dentures. And I can tell people all the time that I never, ever remembered a dentist telling me, I've got a denture patient tomorrow morning and I'm excited.
Yeah.
Most dentists don't like dentures. And now I hear it every time I do the lecture. Somebody comes up and says, this is great. I love this because, I'm teaching better, faster, simpler, more accurate record-taking technologies using digital. And, the results are we're taking what, as much as the textbooks like to tell us we can do dentures in 5 appointments, we know we're not doing them but in 8,
Right.
6 at best. And now we're doing them in 2 or 3. And they fit better and the materials are better. So yeah, I'm loving life and I love seeing dentists get excited. And of course I love working with lab techs. I spend a lot of time, direct hands-on training of lab technicians. But I'm now a CDOCS faculty member. So last weekend, I'm talking to dentists who, want to learn more about digital denture.
That is so cool. One of the things that I think is so interesting about this whole progression to digital is that I feel like the labs were way ahead of the doctors in adapting to this. And I'm not sure why. I know that doctors, I was talking to a doctor actually yesterday who said, I don't want to be a lab technician. I've never enjoyed lab work.
Right.
And I was explaining a little bit, about how much easier it is to do it digitally. And I think doctors oftentimes, when they hear that concept of a digital denture or whatever, that they assume that there is, oh my gosh, now I've got to do all this crazy stuff,
Right.
learn a new system, and it's going to be hard, and I've got to do all of this, the lab end of it myself. And truly, that is not the case, right?
Not at all. Not at all. A dentist doesn't have to have a scanner. He didn't have to do anything different than what he's ever done. If he's okay with the way he takes records with alginates or impression material and trays and custom trays and border molding and face bows and bite rims, if he's okay with all that, then continue to do that. But just send those things to a lab that's digitally oriented, and the lab will digitize those records. And from that point forward, it's a digital workflow, and the dentist gains a lot of advantage from that. What I primarily teach is, look, most of you now have an intraoral scanner. I'm going to show you how to take a wash impression in the patient's old denture, take it out of the mouth, scan it, and make the best preliminary impression you've ever had before. We've got science now that's proven that, and dentists that have done thousands of cases, and we know that that's a wonderful workflow. And once dentists realize, they'll come up and say, you mean all I have to do is take a wash impression in their old denture, take it out of the mouth, scan it, send that to the lab, and I'll get back this really cool denture. That's it. It's, you could have a try-in in the middle there, but it's a printed try-in, and you don't have to move teeth and wax ever again. If the printed try-in doesn't fit, you just take another wash impression. If the bite's off, you just do what you do every day. Tap, tap, grind, grind. Right? Adjust the bite, take a new bite, and boom, send that back to the lab, and you'll get it's a 3-appointment process, easily.
Well, I still have like PTSD flashbacks of dental school of waxing dentures and taking an old pair of like pantyhose and like rubbing the wax, trying, to make it all glossy and everything. And, one of the things you said that really resonated with me is that oftentimes patients will come in and they'll have an existing denture and they say, I really like it. I've had it for, like 20 years or whatever it is, but I know I need a new one. The teeth are wearing a little bit, or, the acrylic has finally just gotten so thin you can almost like hold up the light and look through it. And they're like, I know I need a new one, but I'm really happy with this one. And I think for most doctors, that's like a big neon red light. Like, oh my gosh, they like what they've got. And now I got to try and make that over for them in this whole concept of wax and everything else. And so what you're saying is basically you can, take a wash impression in that really nice, or, the denture they love, and basically hand them something 3 appointments later, sometimes probably 2 appointments later, that really is pretty much what they had to start with, right?
Heard it a bunch. Patients saying, wow, it feels like my old denture. I said, well, that was the goal, right? And yes, we can do, what I described was what we call a reference denture. We use the old denture, which is usually worn, and maybe we have to open the bite a little bit. Of course, we're going to restore occlusion and anatomy. So that's a reference denture workflow where we take the old denture as a starting point. And what the old denture gives us is a great impression tray, gives us a great way to take a bite, gives me occlusal plane, midline, and incisal edge position. But I want the dentist to tell me, the teeth need to be a little longer, or she likes her mold, but you need to show just a little 2 millimeters more teeth. And we take that information and we make a new set. But if the patient comes in, and I see this quite often, and they pull that old denture out of the mouth, and it may look crappy to you and me, but they love it. I'll take a new denture, Jimmy, if you can make it just like this. Well, the digital technology allows us to do that too. We can make a 100% clone digitally, and all the dentist has to do is scan that denture all the way around and send me the file, and we have a workflow called the copy denture, and it is an exact duplicate, but better because the materials are better.
I am going to actually, no joke, I'm going to steal clone denture because I hadn't thought of that term before, and I love that because we all in the field, we all run into those situations, and oftentimes you're right, we do need to reestablish occlusion, or give them some more length or whatever. Let me ask you this, Jimmy. How in this process, how critical are some good photos for you? And what I'm talking about is like, photos with almost like you were going to do orthodontics, photos of a patient with their lips closed, photos with a smile, that sort of thing. Does that help you do your job better?
100%. There are labs that will guarantee a 2-appointment denture if they have those photographs. And I tell dentists all the time, send them no matter what, no matter whether you're doing a reference denture or a start from scratch denture or a copy denture. Get your cell phone out and take 2 pictures for the lab guy. And you want the ratio, you want forehead to chin, ear to ear. That's the ratio you want. And take a high smile and a relaxed lip. And if you really want a helpful, take a lateral view so that we can see lip protrusion, things like that. But those 3 photographs can be brought into the lab design software, overlaid with the setup, so we can actually see the setup in the patient's face. We can send a screenshot, you can send it to the patient, say, this is what your teeth can look like, what do you think? It has helped us so many times, right? I can't tell you how many times I've set a case, and I think it looks great with the data I had. I drop the photograph on top, and I'm showing way too much teeth. And so I make that adjustment, and we just saved ourselves an appointment.
One of the most embarrassing moments I ever had in my career was a relative, and she needed new dentures, and of course she comes to me because, oh, you're the expert. And I know a lot about digital stuff, but I don't consider myself a denture expert. And we were doing this analog. I gotta say, it was in the early 2000s, and the first wax try-in, I tried to lengthen her a little bit, and I didn't take photos. I didn't do any of the things you just talked about. And we got the wax try-in back, and we put it in, and she looked like Mr. Ed, which for the younger people watching this, it was a TV show about a talking horse. So, I mean, she was just showing way too much teeth. It was embarrassing. And, so we had to go back and reset. But you don't get that with these kind of reference points of giving people this information in the lab so that they can then just recreate or know where everything is.
That's right. Makes it very predictable.
So I don't know, this may be a question that makes you uncomfortable, and if it does, then we'll just move on. But do you have like a favorite wash material that you recommend for people to take that initial impression with?
I teach a two-step wash because the borders are very critical. We want good border data. So
Right.
I like polyvinyl siloxane.
Okay.
That's just a preference. Polyether certainly works, but polyvinyls tend to scan better because they're
Okay.
not as reflective. So I like a nice heavy-bodied polyvinyl around the border
Okay.
of the old denture. Go in the mouth and do border molding movements. Let that set
Hmm.
up. Take the denture out. Put a light-bodied fast set in the palate and back on the border, and go back in and do those border molding movements again. That gives the best data, as good as any custom tray. And I hope I never have to pick up another compound stick in my life.
Oh my
And
gosh.
this just makes it so easy. And I see really, really good data. And dentists are good at this. This is not a hard thing for a dentist to do.
Right.
So, and once we're done, we take it out, we scan it, and then we clean it up and give it back to the patient. And they go out the door with their denture, but we have all the data we need. It's good
Yeah, you're
data.
not.
And I always said, good data equals better results.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's the old computer adage of garbage in, garbage out. I mean, that is absolutely true. And I'm glad you brought this up about the border molding and compound, because I think if you were trained to use compound, and I'm assuming, I don't know the procedure for every dental school in the U.S., but I'm assuming most of them are probably still using compound. If you say border molding to most doctors, they're just like, no, because
This is not fun.
that's, you know, I remember actually being in school and doing border molding one time with compound, and I overheated the doggone compound, and it dripped on my finger, and I blistered the entire back of my left middle finger. It was horrible.
Yeah.
And I can remember doing that and thinking, oh, it's perfect, and then showing it, to my instructor, and they would take a Bard Parker knife and scrape some of it off, and then be like, add some here.
Yeah.
And that was a whole appointment right there, just trying to border mold. And you can do this with a PVS in like what, 5-6 minutes if you've got like a slow set.
Yeah. Yeah, for slow set, I use recently I've been using Aquasil heavy
Okay.
bodied fast set, and it's less than 3 minutes for that first step of border molding. So
And it is easy. I mean, border molding really is, the movements and stuff are easy for doctors. It's the materials that make it so hard. You mentioned too, the materials are better. And I know it's funny, my big timeline point now is COVID. Things either happened before COVID or after COVID. And this was right before COVID. But
right.
I know that there was a lot of concern in the industry that the resins that people were using when they were printing denture bases were brittle, that they broke
Yeah, they were.
easily. And
They were.
materials science evolves so fast, especially in this entire thing of 3D printing resins. Talk to me a little bit about those changes and just the changes in strength. I mean, I don't expect you to go into chemistry, but just kind of talk about where we were, 5 years ago to now.
No, I'm a little bit of a nerd about chemistry and science, and
God
finding
bless you, my
research,
friend.
and being with Dent Supply, it got me some peeks behind the curtain, and working with the R&D team, and the folks at Boston University did all the validations for Dent Supply on their Lucitone digital print. So before that, though, pre-COVID, before 2019, there was a feeling in our world that digital dentures were bad, printed dentures were bad, and milled dentures were better. And at that time, that was 100% true. But like most of us, we tend to generalize, 2, 3, 4 years later, even though there's something better now. Somebody says digital dentures is printed. Oh, no, I'm never doing that again. They're terrible. Well, that
Right.
was the generation one resins, and they were bad. They were okay for temps, but they were not high impact. They would break easy. They didn't look like the acrylic we've been making forever. But when generation two resins hit in dent supply, Lucitone Digital Print was the first one. Um, it's a different, I mean, it's a drastically different ball game. So acrylic that we've always been using in the past has a resistance to fracture of around 1,000 joules per meter squared, right? That's what it takes to break a maxillary denture. We've known that forever, and that's a term that is a manufacturing standard called high impact. You see it on the box, high impact acrylic. That means it won't break before 1,000. Well, when they were doing mill dentures, which is just pre-processed version of that, so it was
Right.
stronger. It was 1,500, and the first printed ones were like 600. So they didn't even be qualified to call high impact. Well, when Boston did the study and the testing on Lucitone Digital Print, the first test was around 1,500. But
Wow.
because they needed FDA validation, right, they said, well, that's good. We match what milled is, but the FDA requires us to test it at 98.6. And these were polymers. These are not methyl methacrylate. So they have to go back and do the test again at 98.6. And those dentures, the first one didn't break until 3,000 joules per meter squared.
Wow.
And then they did another 100, and 2,000 was the worst. So it's easy to say if old acrylic was 1,000, this polymer is now 2,000 at worst, that the
Wow.
dentures we're printing out of this is 2 times stronger than any acrylic we ever printed. And that's science, that's data. Nobody can argue with that, but yet it still bears that burden of living on the pre-COVID history of Gen 1 resins, and everybody thinks they're bad. And if Gen 2 resin is bad, then that means somebody did something wrong. Because the processing, the steps, the curing, it's all important.
You know, one of the things I think that's kind of interesting, I think it goes back probably to marketing, is that companies very rarely across the board, whether you're in dentistry or not, don't usually come out and say, what we were selling you last year, it was bad, and we know it was bad, and so we've upgraded to this. But I wish they would, because you're right. I mean, in dentistry, especially now with the internet, everybody's connected, everybody's communicating, and if you're talking to somebody and they tell you, I tried this, it was bad, it broke, or whatever it was. We do tend to, like you said, generalize and think, okay, well, I'm never doing that because that is bad.
Right.
And I feel like it would be nice if people would simply say, yeah, the stuff we gave you before wasn't that good, but this is, like 3 times better. Because the material science in this stuff, I mean, I love it. I'm like you, I'm kind of a chemistry nerd. But I just wish more people knew that. So I'm glad that you are actually geeking out on the numbers for me, because that's the kind of stuff that doctors need to know. I mean, there really aren't a lot of limitations to doing this digitally now. It's not like you're selling a discount, prosthetic to the patient. You're actually selling them one that's better than the ones that set the gold
Yeah.
standard.
Yeah. And the costs are lower for labs. So what I see labs doing is that they're making this better denture and selling it for the same price they were selling the old acrylic for. So nobody's paying more money. The labs are able to make more of these per day than they were the old style, because the hands-on time to do digital is less. Um, but it's a better product. I mean, this is about a win-win situation as you can get. But even in our industry, there's a lot of lab guys that don't believe in printed dentures. They just think they're not as good as acrylic. And that's, we've got in our routine, and we've been doing it the same way for a long time. And I
Yep.
get it. If you do a new thing and it doesn't work out exactly like the old thing, then the new thing's bad.
Yep.
No, we just need to dial in your skills a little bit and make sure you're using the right products and equipment. But Dr. Bendayan was at Boston when they did all the validations, and I trust these guys implicitly. They did some really good work, on a totally freedom. You do the test and you tell us how strong it is, and he'll tell you to this day that there's no doubt that Lucitone is stronger than the old acrylics we've done, but you got to do it right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've got to have the right printer. You've got to have the right post-cure station, all of that. So getting a little bit now into doctors printing in office, you said something a second ago that I wanted you to kind of expound on a little bit. You talked about like the finishing time is actually less, and I think that is sometimes doctors look at a photo of a printed denture and they see all the supports on them, and
Right.
they think, oh my gosh, well I'm never, that's going to take me years to get right. Why would I want to do this myself? Can you talk to me a little bit about the finishing and polishing process?
Well, again, chemistry helps a lot here, but yeah, 3D printing is messy, and it's a very minority of the dentists that want to deal with it in their office,
Right,
but more
right.
are doing it. There's some good advantages as a dental office to have a printer, Crown and Bridge temporaries,
Mm-hmm.
trays, models, and then some, but not many, want to do dentures.
Yes.
But chemistry, I always say it. Again, I was the most okayest dental technician, and one of my worst skills was the pumice bench. I hated it. I was terrible at it. Still am. But the chemistry today allows us to print something. The supports snap off, right? And then you just smooth down those nibs that are left over, and then we have a chemical that we can paint onto the surface of that denture base and teeth that actually soaks in 10 or 15 microns, and then the denture goes in the curing unit. So this sealer glaze is locked in 15 microns deep. So this is unlike any denture glaze we've ever had. I haven't polished a denture in 7 years. Hope I
Wow.
never have to do it again. This glaze has just become my Mike's Red Hot. I put it on all my dentures and teeth. It's just easy, fast, quick, and it's better than. Again, we've been using glazes on dentures for a long time, but they're all
Right.
surface glazes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're on after the denture's finished, and that's okay. We know there's a limit to the time, and that peels and cracks and yellows. This one not so much, and so there's a better way to do that now, and you don't have to polish. So if I don't have to stand in a pumice bench, and all I got to do is brush some clear stuff on, throw it in the curing unit, and I keep saying Dent Supply. There are now 2 or 3 other guys on the market that stuff is just as strong, and one of the ones I love is from Pac Dent, and it took my hands-on time from maybe 20 to 25 minutes of assembly and seating and painting everything,
Right.
plus an hour cure time, down to 5 to 7 minutes of assembly and painting and 10 minutes cure time.
Wow.
Yeah, it's incredible, and that's how fast it's changed.
Can you tell me the name of some of these glazes, just out of curiosity? I know this isn't an endorsement. I'm just kind of curious if doctors
Right.
want to look into it.
Well, most people have their own. Like the Lucitone digital print system is called Step 3. Step
Okay.
2 is the bonding material. Step 3 is the glaze. So it's
That's
called
actually a
Step
pretty good
2,
marketing idea. You know when to
Yep,
use it.
yep. And the Pac Dent was called N2F, so it doesn't need nitrogen. Um,
Okay.
N2F glaze. And the cool thing about theirs is one of the reasons it's faster is that they also designed it to be the bonding resin. So they cut out Step 2, and you kind of bond the teeth and spread the glaze all in one go.
Oh, that's a nice time saver.
Big time saver. Yeah, it is the
So,
most efficient digital workflow, denture workflow out there.
okay. So you mentioned the the fit and the bonding step. How easy is that to do? I mean, because I think once again people will picture the supports on the denture base, and they picture the supports on the printed teeth, and they think, how will those things ever go in right?
Well, the software helps with that. I mean, it's somebody described it as Lego blocks, right? When the teeth
Yeah.
and the denture base is printed, it's designed to fit exactly, and it has a couple of points where it bottoms out, so you really can't mess up the occlusion. So we just don't put supports on those couple of areas. And
Okay.
if we put supports everywhere else and we take away too much, it really doesn't matter because it's going to bottom out. And then there's an exact amount of space for the bonding resin. And it's very fast, very easy. The supports come off super easy. I use a kind of a rubber compound wheel, and
Yeah.
it takes me less than a minute per tooth segment.
Okay. I know. Actually, I'm getting it's coming here today for me. little shameless plug for Medidenta since they sponsor me. They've put together a finishing and polishing like burr kit just for 3D printing. And I think that's one of the things too that, you know, whether you're doing dentures or you're doing, like you said, you know, you're doing like interim crown and bridge kind of things, the polishing, you know, can be really critical. And so having something that you can, you know, do step by step through is easier. But then if you've got the glaze, you know, you just get it close and then, you know, let the glaze do what it does. You mentioned nitrogen, Jimmy. Do you think nitrogen is critically important in dentures or a nitrogen-free environment?
It depends on the material. Some materials are designed to cure 100% without it. Others require it. One of the chemical engineers from PacDent told me once that, you know, no matter what anybody says, any polymethyl methacrylate light cured resin is going to cure better in an oxygen-free environment. Doesn't mean you have to have it, but they prefer to cure them all that way. And so, you know, it depends on the resin. Some don't need it at all, and those are they tend to be a more viscous, thicker resin. So whatever magic is in that chemistry, you know, solves that problem. But you know, I like to use nitrogen because, you know, the parts come out nice and dry and clean and ready to go. But it's not the end of the world with some if you don't have it.
Well, and I think too, once again, from the doctor's standpoint, I think sometimes we get hung up on, you know, is it critical? Is it not critical? So it's good to know that if you know your materials, then, you know whether you need that or not.
That's a message we have to give often to labs and doctors, is that with these printed polymers that we're now using, either the ceramic fill for crown and bridge or these denture bases, these are not good chemicals that we want our hands and fingers and mouths on in the liquid state or uncured state. So it is very critical that we cure them fully and properly. And people say, well, I'll just put it in that curing unit. Well, it may seem hard, but if you don't have all the molecules cured up, you put that in the mouth, you're going to cause problems. And so it's a little bit more critical that we cure things properly than we used to use with acrylic. Acrylic can still be more sensitive to patients. Methyl methacrylate still causes a lot more sensitivity than polymers that we use. But in the liquid state, our uncured state is not good. So it's very important that they're cured right.
So it helps, obviously, then to make sure that when you're doing this, you're doing it with systems that are validated to work with one another.
Yeah,
and
I have learned that word means something. When somebody's done the validation, that absolutely means something. So I pay attention to it.
Okay, yeah, and that is important, and that's something, you know, that people can learn from a company website, because I know that most of the printing companies or most of the printer companies are really big on you know, giving a list so that lab techs and doctors can look at it and say, okay, yeah, this printer will print this resin, you know, this curing unit will cure this resin properly, because that's critical too. If you're using the wrong resin in the wrong printer, or you're curing the resin in the wrong curing unit, you know, you can have failures, you can have brittleness, you can have irritation, all of that kind of stuff. How long do you normally cure a denture for?
But it depends. You know, one system I use takes an hour.
Okay.
And like I said, the PacDent Denture Base 2, it's cured in the auto flash and nitrogen curing unit in it's about 7.5 minutes.
Okay. Well, that's it. That auto flash, that's a pretty amazing thing. I have one, and the combination of the nitrogen environment and those flash lamps is just nutty. I think it's important too for people to realize that when you take it out of the printer, it's not totally cured. I mean, I've heard the number from somebody in the industry that said when it comes out of the printer, it's actually only about 20% cured, and you need that you've got to have that post-cure process to get the other 80%. Have you heard that, or since you're kind of a chemistry guy,
Yeah,
thought I'd
I've
ask you
heard
if
much
you.
higher. It's
Okay,
like 80% cured, because it's hard, it's rigid.
right.
But when we cut on it gently and with softer instruments, and we don't want to generate a lot of heat on the surface because it is heat sensitive. And that's why we put those horizontal bars on all the dentures, because the printing will distort it if you don't have those horizontal bars. But no, I think it's mostly done when it comes out of the printer. The light sources
Okay.
in the printing technology are good and designed to be that way. But I think the final cure is critical.
Yeah. I had obviously no way to validate that, and I thought, wow, if it's only 20%, it almost seems like it'd be flexible a little bit. So that's
Yeah,
I wanted to
yeah,
ask you because I know you know. Um,
yeah.
the design process in this, you've been doing this for a long time, so you can probably fly. But how long does it take to design this? You get the STLs of the preliminary impression. How long does it take you to then get something that you can, feel like, all right, we're ready to put this in the printer?
Once the scan is in and I start, I can design a full over full in 30 minutes or less, 20 to 30
Wow.
minutes, and the STL is ready for printing. Sometimes a single arch can also take those 20 to 30 minutes, because single arches, you do a lot more tooth movement.
Right.
And I've used 3Shape, InLab, exocad, and it's just, those are tools. And
Hmm.
you may like you know this tool better, or I might like that tool better. I think there's lots of snickering among lab guys that you should use exocad, it's better. Well, it is
Right.
good, but you know I've used 3Shape most of my career and InLab, but I could use any of them. I have preferences over what workflow I'm doing, which software I
Right.
want to use, but um, either or, it's around a half hour.
Okay. You know, what I like to compare it to is kind of like if you go to Home Depot and you need a hammer. When you go into the hammer aisle, it's mind blowing how many different hammers there are. And you know what? All of them work. Maybe one of them has, like a little bit better weight for you, or maybe the handle fits your hand better. But in the end, it's not like somebody uses a Craftsman hammer and they build a better deck than
Right.
somebody that's using a Stanley hammer. I mean, it's just what you get used to, and what fits you. I I appreciate the fact you brought that up, because the software is important, but it's not like if you're using something else that you're dooming your situation to failure.
All the teeth that we ever used before out of all the drawers, they're in that
Yeah,
computer. So technicians that think that all this digital is taking their skills away, it's not. It's just a
right.
tool. Use it, don't use it, but
Yeah,
I still have to set the teeth. Now the computer helps me set the teeth, and I rely on the computer to do things that I used to
right.
have to do one tooth at a time. But and I take advantage of that, right? And I honestly think the dentures that I do today are way better than the dentures I used to do 20 years ago. I mean, hands down. I can't imagine going back that way, and making a denture that looks like almost every other denture out there. But there are some super skilled technicians out there that know how to wax and set teeth and anatomical. They're just beautiful. I'm not that guy, right? So, but I
Right.
can use the tools in a piece of software, and I can make a pretty good looking denture pretty quickly.
Well, and that comes to the whole thing of, people will sometimes ask me, because I'm so into this. I'll be like, well, you're going to put the labs out of business, and honestly, I don't I don't feel that way at all.
Nah,
Um,
me neither.
I really feel that you need a human in the loop, and there's always going to be a need for people, for whatever it is. I mean, the thing I like to say is that you can't put a soul into a machine. And sometimes there's just something about that human element being involved in things where,
Right.
because, you've been doing this a long time and you've got, the knowledge base to, like, how these are supposed to look, that you can look at something and go, in this particular case, this canine eminence needs to be, built out a little bit, or whatever it is. And I don't think a machine will ever be able to do that, because they just don't have that, I don't know, feel or whatever you want to call it. It's like the force.
Right.
If you've got it, you've got it,
AI may do it one day, but I don't think it happened in our lifetime.
Yeah, I agree. And something else that I wanted to bring up, Jimmy, and this is really for the younger doctors out there, is that when I got out of school, I had always wanted to be a dentist from the age of 3. And I got that degree, and I kind of had a little bit of that. I did it. I've done this, and I know what I'm doing. And in reality, I was not dangerous, but that was about the limit of my skills. And I have learned so much from lab techs that have changed the way I do things. And I remember being young, and I sent a denture case to a lab, and the guy was probably, I'm like, I don't know, 29 or 30, and the lab tech was in his 60s. And he was a guy by himself. Maybe he had one other employee, but it was a real small lab. And he called me and he was like, "Can I talk to you? Can I buy you lunch?" And I was like, "Sure." And we went out and he brought a couple of cases, and he was so nice about it, but he was like, "You're making my job harder. You do it this way, or use this here." And it completely changed the way I did things. And over the years, I've learned that the people on the lab bench have got this crazy amount of knowledge that I don't think a lot of doctors take advantage of. I do, maybe if I'm in the area I'm in, I might do one denture a month. You're doing, 10 a day or more. You've got to be better at it and have a knowledge base from it. Do you have a lot of doctors call you and ask you about, I'm sure you
Oh,
do
yeah.
now, because you've kind of become
But
a
even then,
rock star.
a lot of my time was spent chairside helping docs with wax try-ins or custom trays. But I can tell you, I started in 79, and I can tell you in the first whatever number of years
Yeah.
that I came into the industry in a generation where there was a lot of dentists that said, "I'm the dentist, you're the lab guy," right? And they knew everything, and we just,
Yep.
yes, sir. And it changed, and dentists started realizing the lab guys can help, and I hardly ever see that anymore. I mean, even
That's great to hear.
prosthodontists are embracing digital and working with lab guys, and I hear it everywhere I go now that I couldn't do it without my lab guy. And I mean, I am so blessed. I spend over half of my time in front of a crowd, and that crowd is dentists, not lab guys. And so here I am, a lab guy, right, talking to you about how to take an impression. And it was how I built up our lab, right? My little study club lectures were stuff like, here's how to take a good shave. Here's how to take the best triple tray impression, right? Here's what ceramic to use where in the mouth on an all ceramic crown, right? Here's the best margin design for simple everyday stuff. And, I would go educate myself, and then I would go share with dentists, and, here's what I see in the lab, here's what I see working. And, that grew our business a lot because we were consultants and we were supporters and we were helpful. And I'm still of the mindset that, look, if you're going to run a lab, it's not about, look how beautiful I can make this thing. It's not what it's about. What you do is you solve the problem for your dentist. Figure out what their problem are and make a solution for it, and you'll do great.
Well, and it's a thing of one of the cool things that I got in my career was He doesn't do dentures. This lab tech only does crown and bridge. But he is my age. He worked for a big lab for about 4 years. And then he went out on his own and he was cold calling in the area. And he happened to come into my office and I had time to talk to him. And he was in his basement at the time. And now he's grown this thing to, I don't know, like 10 employees. It's called Technical Crown and Bridge. It's in Lee Summit, Missouri. But we got such a great relationship that, I would call him and be like, okay, I'm thinking about doing this, or I'd send him a case and he would call me and he'd be like, you don't want to put this material here. And what I learned through that was that, I might do something a little wonky like that, once or twice a year. He'd see it 10 or 15 times a year and he'd call me, like, John, I've seen this done 30 times and only once did it not break, or something, like that. And that knowledge just made me so much better. It really warms my heart to hear you talking about that interaction, because I think sometimes the word teamwork gets a little overused sometimes, but it really, truly is a team. Living in Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes is incredible, but if he doesn't have an offensive line in front of him, he's not going to do very much. The success is all of us working together, and I think that's just so critical. So I'm glad to know that's kind of changed, because I stumbled across it, but it's so important, I think, for everybody to be on the same page, working together, looking out for each other.
It works.
It does. It does. I had a wax try-in one time, and the lab tech was in my office, and I've never forgotten this. It was kind of a grumpy patient, and the wax try-in was off, and it was my fault. I mean, I knew the minute we put it in, I was like, oh, gee. And the guy stood up, and he looked at the patient, and he goes, you know what? That's my fault. That's on me. He completely stepped in front of a speeding train for me and completely changed the outcome of the way things, the way things went. And that's, I don't know, that's the kind of stuff, like, I'll never forget that moment. That was incredible to me.
Nope, I did it all the time. The patients would look up and say at a wax try-in, and I'm here for the third time, but why can't you get this right? And I can't say, well, because the doctor can't take a bite. I have to say, we're just technicians. We're doing the best we can with what we have, and I'm sorry, but we're going to get it right for you. And that's why I love what we're doing now. It's just so much better now because, again, starting with a bite rim versus starting with data of their existing denture, the teeth are so much closer where they need to be, and the try-ins go so much better now, and sometimes we even skip the try-in altogether. Things are so good. So,
walk me real quick. I don't need you to go into like tremendous detail on this, but just walk me through a normal case that somebody does that they're going to send to you. What do you tell the doctors to do?
Well, demographics tell us that 60 to 80% of our patients that are requesting a new denture has an old denture. So we know that that's most of our patients. So that's the most common. That's the reference denture workflow. And I tell docs, it doesn't matter how bad it looks or whatever. Use it to take your preliminary impression using this heavy body, light body technique I'll show you, and the bite. And take the bite where it is. And if you think we need to open it, just tell me, right? And I'll open it a millimeter or so.
Right.
But wash impressions, take them out of the mouth, scan it with your wand, and you don't have to scan the whole denture. You just scan the intaglio, the borders, and the buccal surface. Scan the bite, and send me those scans. Give the patient their dentures back. I'm going to create the dentures in 30 minutes in a piece of software. I'm going to print either the final or a prototype, try-in, whichever way we want to go.
Right.
And I'm going to deliver those to you. And because this reference denture wash is so easy to take, the data's so good, your scanner captures it so well, 3 out of 5 times, this thing's going to fit like you won't believe. So that's why I said sometimes we'll just go ahead and print the final, because we know that 3 out of 5 times it's going to be right. maybe you have to adjust the bite a little bit. Maybe the midline's off a little bit, whatever. But if it is off, you make the adjustments. You can take that prototype I send you. You can say to the patient, if it's close but you're not quite sure, send them home for a day or two. They can wear this thing for 3 years if they want to.
Right.
Right. Come back, draw the midline where it needs to be, draw the cervical margin where it needs to be, add some wax if you want to show me the length. Take a new bite, grind it in and take a new bite if the bite's off. If it doesn't fit, take another wash impression. Take that out of the mouth, scan it, send me that, and I'll take those changes. And the software's so good at this, I'll go ahead and print the final from that. So that's a 3-appointment process, if we don't send the patient home with it. If we send it home, it's 4 appointments.
Sure.
But if you throw in the photographs on a reference denture workflow, we can do it in 2. I'll go ahead and print the final, and if I've got the photographs, I feel very confident that these dentures are going to be very, very close, and you can deliver them. And we know this now because so many dentists have told us that, you keep sending me this monolithic prototype try-in denture. And I can't tell you how many times out of the last 10 that if that would have been pink and white, I would have delivered it. Labs have heard that enough now. They've said, okay, I'm just not printing the prototype anymore. I'm just printing the final. If it's wrong, I'll have to make another final. I get it. But if it's right 3 out of 5 times, how much time have we both just saved?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me ask you on the prototype monolithic try-in, are there any situations that a doctor should be aware of where they're like, this is going to need a try-in just to make sure? Is there anything that just jumps out at you when you get a case? You're like, we need to do a try-in on this one.
Well, I'm a believer that if the patient is one of the other 20%, no teeth,
Right.
no denture, that they should get a prototype because we've got to start with some sort of bite data, like a bite reel
Sure.
or something. But the only other time that I felt a prototype was absolute would be if somebody started with a mush bite. But if somebody has a reference denture and I've got photographs, I don't see a need for a prototype.
Okay.
Or a monolithic prototype. We can call it a prototype, but it'll be pink and white, and it
Sure.
could be the final. So I like saying, here's your try-in, but hey, if it works, it's also your final.
How many doctors, I've got a friend of mine that does this, and he's the only one I know doing it. I'm just kind of curious since you're in the industry. He actually talks to patients about, because they're printed, he's like, you know what, we can just have the lab make 2 sets, and you've got a backup. And rather than charging you, whatever the fee is for dentures, it's fee plus a little bit more, not a bunch. But then you've kind of got a backup if, like worst case scenario, something happens. How often do you think people are doing that kind of a service? I think it's kind of cool if the patient can afford it.
Not enough. Not enough because it's so easy to do. I print 2 of everything I do. I don't print. I don't do a lot anymore, right? I work
Right.
for a few select people, and any projects, or if I'm speaking with somebody, we'll do a case together. But anytime I print anything, I always print 2, and I just send it to them.
Okay.
If I were in a commercial lab business for a living, I would say, hey, I'll give you a second one for half price or another $100.
Right.
And I suggest that you tell the patient, look, you can have a second one for half price or a couple $100, whatever. I think it's a wonderful idea because if I'm in the middle of printing a denture, it's copy, paste, print, and some assembly time. It makes a lot of sense to do 2. And I think it's a wonderful idea, and I don't see it used enough. But it will grow. People will start to realize, hey, this is pretty easy. But I think the other side of that is that we know that if we put this one thing in the mouth and the patient breaks it or loses it, that printing it again is easy.
Yes.
So, but the patient can't stand to be without teeth, so why not go ahead and have the backup?
One of the funniest stories I ever heard along these lines is, I wish I could remember the comedian's name. It's somebody kind of famous, but he said when he was starting, he was doing comedy routines for a cruise line. And so he was on a cruise ship for like 6 months or something of like 1-week cruises. And he said one day a storm blew in and the ship was just, rocking to and fro. And he said everybody was seasick. Everybody was in their rooms. And he said he was in a bar on the ship like hanging onto the bar stool and talking to the bartender. And he said this elderly gentleman, all of a sudden the door opens and a bunch of wind and rain comes in. This poor older guy comes in and he grabs, they had a big trash can with a liner. He grabs the trash can and he just loses his lunch into the trash can and takes a paper towel off the bar, wipes his face off and says like, I'm sorry. And then stumbles back out. And he said about 30 seconds later, the door opens and he came back in. He's like, I lost my teeth.
Yeah.
And I mean, that stuff happens, you know,
Yep.
something like that happens. They go in the toilet. Some people may not want to pick them back up, you know.
But I'll tell you a good story
Yeah,
in
please.
that light. The one of the early clinical trials for one of the big DSOs with Dent Supply. I went out and helped the office learn how to scan for reference dentures, and so had a couple of patients. Went back, designed the prototype, put it in a box, shipped it to the guy. It was great. So really, all I had to do was then print the final. So printed the final, sent it to her. The lady went on a European trip and called him a couple weeks later, and had same thing. Something happened. She dropped it, and it chipped, and it was cutting, and she couldn't wear it. And
Right.
you know, she called him from Italy. You know,
Wow.
anything you can do to help. So he calls me. I said, well, yeah. Do you have it in the computer? I said, I do, but that was just a clinical trial, and I had coordinated with his lab, who had also been trained, and I said, I'll send them the file, and they could print it. And somehow they couldn't get it done or whatever. So I printed it and put it in a FedEx box, and she had her denture in Italy the next morning.
That is amazing.
So and all I did was pull up the file and print it. I didn't have to do anything new other than
Yeah.
print it and assemble it. You know, in less than 24 hours across the world, she had it. And you know, same thing. If you called me today and said, hey, that patient we did, you know, she broke it, even though they don't
Right.
break easy, she broke it. You know, what do we do? I said, tell me where it broke, and I'll go pull up the file right now, and I'll thicken up that area, and I'll print
Yeah.
the new one and put it and have it over there this afternoon. Joe.
Wow. See, that is a cool thing about this. I think sometimes people kind of get it in their minds, doctors do at least, that it's like if there's more steps, it's got to be better. Or if, you know, we're going from, like you said, 6 or 8 down to 2, there's got to be some reason. You can't, you know, you're cheating somehow. And really, you're not. I mean, you're just more efficient. It's like riding a bicycle versus, you know, flying somewhere.
Yeah, I'm all about working easier. I don't at my age, I don't need to work harder, and because it works, I'm okay with it, and it does work.
Yeah, yeah. We're butting up against an hour, Jimmy. How can people tell us how people can find you when you're speaking and doing webinars? I mean, that's how I met you. So give us the lowdown on how people can find you.
So when I left Dent Supply to start my own firm, it's called Here to Serve Dental, and the
Okay.
website is heretoservedental.com. And there's a page on my website that lists all my upcoming engagements. And you know, I'm in the later years of my career, so I'm not doing something every week.
Right.
I'm pretty regular, but I also have, you know, all the social medias. So I have a YouTube channel, and a lot of my webinars and things are there. But the easiest way to find me is go to my website. There's a contact form,
Okay.
and my cell number's on there, so you can call me or text me. But
Wow.
you know, I get requests from dentists all the time. I go in dental offices and help train the team. Sometimes it's on scanning techniques. Sometimes it's on instituting new technology into whether it's a printer or scanner or whatever.
Sure.
I'm still doing clinical lectures on behalf of labs. You know, dental associations are reaching out, so I'm speaking at a couple of dental associations and regional societies. And you know, corporations are still using me to help educate folks. So I'm still doing a lot of lab training as well. So you know, the major part of my time is somebody says, "Hey, can you come spend a couple days with my team? Be a lab or dental office," and Absolutely. It's one of my favorite things to do. But, just got back from Chicago. I had 6 lectures in Chicago, and, it's always hot topics and, hanging out with lab guys. And what surprised me about the lab show in Chicago the last 4 or 5 years is the number of dentists that are now coming.
Yes.
I ask every class, and there's at least 6, 8, 10 dentists in a room of 50 technicians, and it's pretty cool. And they get it, right? Because you said it, the labs have embraced digital a lot sooner, and we kind of have our eyes and hands on a lot of the stuff, and it's a great place to learn. And as dentists start to integrate some of these things in their office, it's just a wonderful environment to be in. And it's a free meeting, so why not?
And, I think it's also cool that they have it at a point when, if you're a doctor, you're in Chicago anyway. And so it's super easy just to bop over to the lab show as well. I mean, I think it's just whoever came up with the idea, we should do this, kind of together is super cool. I was over there this year, and my gosh, the setup and the number of people that are there and all of that, it's just incredible. It's a great way.
We had over 450 educational programs at Lab Day this year.
Wow. Yeah, that is. What was the average length of your program? Were they like an hour or?
Yeah, all of them were an hour. One of them was 3 hours, but it was a hands-on demonstration, ongoing, so people could rotate in, and they had 4 stations in this room, and the manufacturer wanted me to do dentures and this guy to do coloring zirconia. And so that was the longest one I did. Most of them are an hour.
Okay. I was going to say 6 programs. I mean, even 6 1-hour programs. If you've never done anything like that, folks, that's not easy.
It is when you love it.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. And obviously you do, my friend. So
I do.
Well, Jimmy, thank you for spending some time with me. I mean, this has been really great to get your perspective on things, and for doctors to realize, before I completely wrap up, I do think it's kind of funny is that a lot of doctors, if they don't ask their lab, they're probably delivering digital dentures currently, and they may not even know. And in my opinion, that is one of the coolest things, that when you just assume that it's, if you think the analog way is better and you can't tell the difference, I mean, that to me answers the question of, is it better or not? So.
Well, the fit is absolutely better. There's no way we can make an analog denture fit as good as we can make a digital denture. It's just technology.
Yeah.
And so the first time somebody does a digital denture, they always comment on the fit, patients and doctors alike.
It's beautiful. Well, thank you, my friend. Thank you very much for spending the time with me. You are the only person that I've talked to that was sitting outside. So you have a unique spot on the podcast. But thanks, Jimmy, so much. Appreciate it. Everybody, this is the Technology Evangelist podcast. I am Dr. John Fluke, the Technology Evangelist. We are sponsored by Medidenta, and I couldn't do this without them. They provide so much help and support on the back end of this podcast. Go to medidenta.com. Please, if you like things, like and subscribe, leave a comment. It always helps. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks, John.